Welcome to Yoga Chats with me, your host, Greg Walsh. Today's guest is CC Darlington, who I've known for many years. CC did Samadhi yoga teacher training maybe 6 years ago, and we've kept in touch ever since. CC, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. I've been listening to the podcast for weeks now, so it's exciting to be on this end of it.
It's great to have you. There's so many things. We've always gotten on very well, and there's so many things that we could talk about. But I think you've a particular angle you'd like to discuss today.
Yeah. So I'm CC. My pronouns are they and them, and I am transgender, non-binary. I just came out last year. But yes, what I was kind of wanting to talk about today was how to make yoga spaces more gender inclusive. So that might be yoga studios, but also how individual yoga teachers can kind of work on their own teaching and how to make that more gender inclusive as well.
It's a topic I wasn't massively aware of about 5 years ago, but it's really so important now. And I do find, running a studio in the center of Dublin city, it is, it's particularly important, I feel, in an urban center, because it's something that we have in Samadhi. We had to put a gender neutral policy in. Not we had to, we felt we should, and people did appreciate it. So
yeah, well, I actually remember that time as well. I have to say, it's one of the things that I was thinking about before we came on to talk today was like what kind of studios I've been to in Dublin that are particularly gender inclusive, and Samadhi comes up as one, simply for like the changing rooms and toilets are like there's no gender in them, which is fantastic. And yeah, it's little things like that, like having changing spaces and toilet spaces in studios that are gender neutral. It doesn't mean necessarily you have to revamp your entire studio and get rid of your gendered bathrooms, but just having a space somewhere where people who don't identify as male or female, who just feel more comfortable in gender neutral spaces can use to get changed. Or
how do we make spaces more gender inclusive, aside from is it language, what do we need to do? Because we always think of yoga as being very inclusive, but is it?
It can be when teachers are aware of this kind of thing.
But can be and is are not the same thing. Like, is it? At the moment, do you feel it's inclusive? CC?
I think a lot of the time it's not. I think like you said, it does come down to language quite a lot. So if we think of things like, even if you think of like adjustments, if a teacher is giving adjustments in class and they say all the men do this and all the women do this, if you really think about what the teacher is probably trying to break down is maybe people with more upper body strength take this variation, or people with more weight down at the bottom end of their body take this variation. So it's quite easy, well, not easy, but it's a simple thing to try and move away from. It's definitely not easy. I mean, in our society, everything is gendered. We grow up gendering people, we grow up gendering things. So it's not necessarily an easy thing to break out of, but it is a simple thing to kind of start becoming aware of. Other things like in language, like when we make generalizations about bodies. So I've been in yoga classes before where a teacher will say men will have a lot easier time doing inversions because they have more upper body strength. Women will have an easier time doing standing balances because they carry more weight on the bottom of their bodies. And again, that doesn't need to be a gendered thing. Not all women carry more weight at the bottom of their bodies. Not all men are stronger in their upper bodies. So these kind of things you can essentially say the same thing, but without gendering it in a way. You could say if you have more upper body strength, you might find this inversion a little bit easier. And even at that's not going to be necessarily true. And then
it's funny, I can hear those are assumptions, or those are statements that I know I have made in the past. So I think bringing in the gender neutral policy made it made me rethink those kind of things. But it's so easy to speak like that, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
Yeah, I
not
think that,
necessary.
yes, yeah, I think that it is easy to speak like that. And you know, it serves a function. You know, it's a way that we communicate with other people, and other people mostly understand and identify with that. But it's these little small changes that we can make. And I mean, even as simple as having on your intake form, having a space for someone to put their pronouns in is fantastic. When you're like referring to somebody in a class, maybe not using gendered pronouns, if you're unsure of their pronouns, saying they or them, or just using their name is fine as well. And also being aware of, so if a student is paying for a class, the name on the card or the payment method they're paying with might necessarily be the name that they now use if they are trans, or even if they're not trans, they may have changed their name. So for me, for example, I mean, when I did my yoga training with you, you would have known me as Ishtar, and my bank details still say Ishtar, but I've since changed my name to CC. So yeah, just like, I mean, any good yoga teacher is going to take time to get to know their students, and this is just one thing that the teachers can do to get to know their students. Ask what they prefer to be, what name they prefer to go by, and what their pronouns are as well.
Yeah. I think I'm amazed at, you know, we all have to fill out forms online and how it's often binary. So in this day and age, it surprises me. Now I must see in our intake form, I must make sure that it isn't, but I'm pretty sure there is at least a third option. So, and if not, we need to address that. So
yeah, and I think it's starting to change. You know, it definitely is starting to change. I've, like you were saying there, a lot of intake forms and stuff don't have like a third option for gender, for pronouns or whatever. But I have definitely seen it. I think even particularly in this year and the last year, I've seen, as I fill out forms, being surprised that I'm seeing now an option for, you know, non-binary or transgender or other, which is, I mean, it's great. It's great to see things changing.
Well, they will change. And, you know, you talking about this, all these, like, it's all small changes that slowly add up to eventually a very slow wave, hopefully. And I, you know, you were saying address people by their name. Like, you know me, that's always been a thing for me. I don't like being that person. I don't like talking. I don't like not, if I'm teaching, I don't like not knowing someone's name in class. So I guess in terms of a studio, it's important that if you are registered as a student with Samadhi, for example, that there is an option to change your name without having to set up a whole new persona. So because some of those it's like your bank, you know, you're locked in and you need to re-register. And then, you know, that's not a big thing in a yoga studio, but it does. If you've been coming for 5 years, you've got a record of all of the classes. You can get receipts for them. You can, you know, and you lose all that. So little things like that.
Yeah. And I think as well, I think one of the main takeaways, I suppose, is that is this idea of being willing to change. And like you were saying there, I must go and check whether my intake form has an option for gender. I think this kind of thing is like, I suppose it's how we react when someone says, actually, that's not how I like to be referred to, or actually, this makes me feel uncomfortable. I think if we look at ourselves and we like, do we feel defensive about that, or do we feel, does it make us angry? Does it make us upset? Why does it make us feel that way, and what can we do to shift it so that it's not about us, and it's about the person that's coming to us with this feedback, and how we can make changes to make them feel more comfortable, really.
Yeah, absolutely. It's because it's not about, if we're the yoga teacher, for example, it's not about us at all. And it is, if we get angry, you know, why? We have the tools in yoga to, we have the self-inquiry. So there, you know, why? Because I must admit, I don't understand all of the nuances of this, but I want to support people. I want people to feel like, in terms of my studio, I want people to come and feel safe. So, and I know that's something years ago on teacher training, we talked about that, how important that is, but that has to be everyone. So, and inclusive. So, I feel as someone who provides a space, it's my responsibility to educate myself, to know, to be able to support people. So pronouns.
Pronouns. So yes, so my pronouns are they and them. I mean, the most common pronouns that people are familiar with are she and her, or he and him, and they and them is becoming much more common now and much more used. There are also other kinds of pronouns. A quick Google search will show you for other people who don't identify as male or female. There's pronouns like Z and Sir, and there's lots of them, and people may definitely prefer those. So yeah, it's about people feeling comfortable. For me, they them feels most comfortable, but for other people, it also may change. You know, people can change what pronouns feel comfortable, and someone can identify as non-binary or transgender and still use gendered pronouns as well. So just because you know someone's pronouns doesn't mean you know their gender, and just because you know someone's gender doesn't mean that you know their pronouns, which is why it's so important to
Is it a minefield? Is it something that people get upset about? Do we have to tread very lightly with fear of insulting somebody? What happens if we get it wrong is what I'm asking.
Yeah. I think for me and for most of the people in the trans and non-binary community that I've met, it's not about the mistakes that people make. People make mistakes. I mean, I make mistakes all the time. It's about how you respond to the mistakes. It's going to happen. You're probably going to misgender somebody. It's about when they say, actually, my pronouns are this, whether you say, oh, yes, okay, yeah, I've got that, and you move on, or whether you take it, you feel like defensive or angry about it, or turn it into oh, I'm so sorry, it's such a terrible thing, I'll never do it again. And again, it makes it about you. It's not about the mistakes you make. I mean, if someone is going out of their way to try and purposely misgender someone, then of course people are going to get annoyed, but I don't think that happens very regularly. And
I really hope not in the yoga scene, not in the yoga community. Goodness, yeah, that'd be pure mean. Back to the they and them. My pedantic brain goes, is that correct grammar? But
yeah, it's a totally valid question. But if you think about, so imagine you're at a train station and you see a bag left unattended, and you say, oh, somebody's left their bag there. You're just talking about a singular person, or at least you assume you're talking about a singular person, but you're using they.
You've just answered my question. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Of course. Yes, of course. It's that's it. Yeah, it's non-gendered. It's very clear when you put it that way. Yeah. Okay, I stand corrected. And I appreciate that little learning experience. So is there anything else that we as yoga providers can do to make people feel more included?
I think the main thing is being willing to learn. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. It's about being willing to recognize the mistakes that you make and to learn from them. If you're making gender inclusive policies or trying to make changes to make spaces more gender inclusive, ask trans people, ask non-binary people what would make them feel more comfortable in these spaces. And if you're including these people in the decisions that you're making, then it's going to make the space that you hold more inclusive as well.
Okay. Yeah, when we put in place our non-binary approach, we inquired, because I really didn't quite know where to begin with it. And so, yeah, we had a couple of people who identified as non-binary, and they were very helpful. And they said, it's just really the things you're talking about. And it wasn't that hard in the end. So
I think a lot of it is just, I think a lot of it is just practice. It doesn't maybe, like, I mean, for somebody who is cisgender, who identifies as the sex they were assigned at birth, it's not something that factors into thought. It's not something that that ever comes to mind unless you're maybe you're asked to change by someone who is trans. So it's just about, it's about listening to these people and then making the changes that help everyone feel more included and comfortable, which it sounds like Samadhi has done. So
well, yeah, it's always a work in progress, though, isn't it? Because
sure.
it's always a constant returning, coming back, and because I feel that it's an evolving sphere. It's something that we need to not slip into complacency with either. And
yeah, I think
like,
as more visibility, I mean, there's a lot more visibility around trans issues now, and as more visibility comes around these issues, there's like more language develops around it as well. So the language and the way to involve marginalized people is always changing. So yeah, it is absolutely dynamic and definitely always a work in progress. Yeah.
And is that a key word? You said marginalized. Do trans people feel marginalized?
Trans people are definitely a marginalized community. There's systemic, it's marginalized in a systemic way by government and by all the institutions that naturally gender people.
And by language, and so they really do need our support. So and it's not, anyone who's listening or watching, it's not hard. It's not hard. And the key thing for me, and I was asking you about it, and people have said it before, if you make a mistake, move on from it, learn from it. Well, CC, on behalf of everyone at home, I'd really like to thank you for having the yoga chats today. So, and everyone at home, thank you. That's all for now. I'm Greg Walsh. I look forward to you joining me for yoga chats again soon.